Before he could conquer the world, he first had to conquer himself and decisively remove anyone standing in his way. He was a 20-year-old boy who in a few short, terrifying months made a clean sweep of mothers, brothers, uncles and cousins, eliminating every threat with surgical precision. He is not yet Alexander the Great. He is just a prince casting a shadow the size of an empire, a shadow born from fear and forged in blood. Hello everyone and welcome back to Immortal History. Today we're not recounting Alexander's legendary victories against the Persians at Granicus or Gaugamela. We won't speak of the Gordian knot or the founding of cities that would bear his name for millennia. Instead, we'll explore the brutal, visceral and lesser-known story of how he truly became king. Because in the neat pages of the history books, the transition is deceptively simple, a single sentence. Philip dies, Alexander ascends to the throne. But the reality was a gruesome spectacle of ambition, survival, and political assassination that unleashed a river of blood, staining his legacy for his entire life. Our story begins in Pella, in the year 356 BC. Here a child was raised in a crucible of conflict. He was caught between the ambiguous, almost obsessive love of a mother who believed herself a descendant of Achilles, and the relentlessly critical eye of a father who was single-handedly rewriting the history of Greece. This boy would grow up with three masters, each shaping him in their own profound way. Aristotle, the philosopher who taught him to think, Homer, the poet who taught him what it meant to be a hero, and the ever-present, gnawing fear of losing everything before he even had a chance to claim it. To the cultured, sophisticated city-states like Athens and Thebes, Macedonia was a rugged, mountainous backwater. It was seen as a province of hearty timber and uncivilized, hard-drinking warriors, not a true Hellenic power worthy of respect. But Philip II, a man forged in the fires of adversity as a former political hostage in Thebes, possessed a vision that stretched far beyond his kingdom's borders. He had studied the art of war from its greatest masters and returned not just as a student, but as a revolutionary innovator. With relentless determination, he completely redesigned the Macedonian army, transforming it from a disorganized seasonal militia into a disciplined professional fighting force that would dominate the age. He introduced the formidable phalanx, armed with the sarissa, a terrifying spear over 3.5 meters long that created an impenetrable, bristling wall of death. Under Philip's command, Macedonia, the backwater province, became a relentless war machine. When his wife Olympias gives birth to a son, Alexander, prophecies and omens swirl around the court, claiming the boy is destined for unparalleled victory. But Philip, ever the pragmatist, knew that prophecies didn't win battles or secure dynasties. He needed more than just a son. He needed a powerful, unquestionable heir. And so, two colossal competing figures loomed over every moment of Alexander's childhood. On one side there was Olympias, a princess from Epirus, proud, mystical and deeply unshakably convinced of her divine descent from the mythical hero Achilles. She was a devotee of esoteric Dionysian cults, a woman who, according to unsettling accounts from the court, slept with snakes as part of her religious rites, embracing a world of shadow and spirit that was alien to the pragmatic Macedonians. On the other side stood Philip, a brilliant, ruthless strategist, a man who collected wives like political assets, marrying for alliances and cementing his power with each new union. Alexander grew up breathing this toxic air of ambition and deep-seated mistrust. The simmering tension became a palpable public threat when, at the age of 7, he watched his father bring yet another wife to court, the young Cleopatra Eurydice. She was a noblewoman of pure Macedonian blood and, more dangerously, the niece of the influential general Attalus. With her arrival came a new and terrifying threat, a whisper that soon became a roar in the halls of power. The potential for a more legitimate heir, one who would be of pure Macedonian blood on both sides. This was unlike Alexander, whose Epirote mother was viewed by some as an outsider. In the viper's nest of the Macedonian court, the young prince learned a brutal early lesson. Power is never secure. It is a flickering flame that can be extinguished at any moment, even during a celebratory banquet. When Alexander turned 13, Philip, recognizing the need to shape his son's formidable intellect, provided him with a tutor whose name would echo through history: Aristotle. The king lured the great philosopher to Macedonia with lavish promises, including the complete state-funded rebuilding of Aristotle's raised hometown of Stagira. At a secluded, beautiful sanctuary known as the Temple of the Nymphs at Mieza, Aristotle established a school for the prince and the sons of Macedonian nobles. Here, in the shade of ancient trees, he taught Alexander and his companions, boys who would one day become his most loyal generals, a vast curriculum: medicine, zoology, logic, art, and the intricate arts of rhetoric and governance. But more than mere subjects, Aristotle instilled in him a philosophy of arete, of excellence, and a deep, burning passion for the epic works of Homer. Alexander began carrying a specially annotated copy of the Iliad with him everywhere he went, even underlining his favorite passages with the tip of his knife. He didn't just want to read about heroes like Achilles. He was determined to become the new Achilles, a living embodiment of the heroic ideal. 2 years later, at the age of 15, another teacher entered his life, this one with 4 legs and a spirit of fire. A Thessalian horse dealer presented Philip with a magnificent black stallion, tall and powerful, but so wild and seemingly insane that no rider could tame it. His name was Bucephalus. As handler after handler was thrown violently to the ground, Philip, growing annoyed at the spectacle of failure, ordered the beast to be taken away. But Alexander, who had been watching intently, spoke up. He boldly claimed the men failed not from a lack of strength, but from a profound lack of understanding. He wagered the full price of the horse, an astronomical sum of 13 talents, that he could ride it. The court watched, amused and skeptical. The boy approached the stallion, not with force or a whip, but with quiet observation. He noticed the horse was not mad, but terrified of its own large, dancing shadow on the ground. Speaking to it softly, in a calm and reassuring voice, Alexander gently turned Bucephalus towards the sun, making its frightening shadow disappear behind it. He stroked its neck, calmed its fears, and then, in one fluid motion, swung onto its back and galloped before the astonished court. It was more than just taming a horse. It was a deeply symbolic act. Alexander had demonstrated that true power came not from brute force, but from intelligence, empathy, and courage. He had claimed a symbol of untamable power through intuition. From that moment, Bucephalus became an extension of his own burning ambition. Wherever that horse's hooves would tread, Alexander would rule. Philip, outwardly proud of his son's undeniable prowess, appointed him regent of Thrace at just 16. He even left Alexander in charge of Macedonia while he campaigned abroad. But this pride was increasingly mixed with a growing, gnawing unease. He had wanted a capable heir, but he had not bargained for one whose brilliance could so easily eclipse his own. The already frayed, competitive relationship between father and son finally snapped in the most public and humiliating way possible during the wedding banquet for Philip's new wife, Cleopatra Eurydice. Her uncle Attalus, a powerful general filled with wine and arrogance, raised his cup high and proposed a toast, shouting for all to hear, "To the new royal couple, now at last, Macedonia will have a truly pure-blooded and lawful king." The insult was a dagger aimed directly at Alexander and his mother. Enraged, Alexander leaped to his feet, hurling his own cup of wine at Attalus and screaming, "Am I then a bastard, you villain?" The hall erupted. Philip, siding with his new family, drew his sword and lunged clumsily at his son. But in his drunken rage, the great king of Macedon, conqueror of Greece, stumbled over the couches and fell pathetically to the floor. Alexander looked down at his father's sprawling form with cold contempt and sneered, "Here is the man who would cross from Europe to Asia, and he cannot even make it from one couch to another." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Olympias was sent into exile in her homeland of Epirus, and Alexander, feeling the very ground crumble beneath him, sought refuge in Illyria. This public humiliation was a crucible for Alexander. It taught him that his only true protection lay not in his birthright, but in cold, hard power and the unwavering loyalty of the army. A silent duel of wills began. Philip, seeking to reconcile but also to test him, recalled his son. The father sent him on dangerous campaigns in Thrace, perhaps hoping to temper his ambition, or perhaps secretly to be rid of him for good. But the son returned each time not only victorious, but with soldiers who were more devoted to him than ever before. While Philip convened the League of Corinth to plan his great legacy-defining invasion of Persia, he was also constantly looking over his shoulder at the irresistible, ambitious, and dangerously popular heir he had created. The year is 336 BC. The ancient capital of Aegae is alive with celebration. A grand wedding is underway, uniting Alexander's sister, Cleopatra, with the king of Epirus, a brilliant political alliance orchestrated by Philip to further secure his power and isolate his exiled wife, Olympias. Philip, at the absolute height of his glory, the undisputed master of Greece, entered the procession. He strode confidently into the grand theatre, having intentionally ordered his bodyguards to keep their distance, a calculated display of magnanimity to appear approachable and beloved before the assembled Greek dignitaries. It was a fatal miscalculation. From out of the crowd, a man named Pausanias, one of his own royal bodyguards, darted forward. In a flash of steel, he drew a dagger and plunged it deep into the king's ribs. Philip, the great conqueror, fell, dying instantly amidst the shocked gasps of the onlookers. Pausanias turned and fled toward horses that were clearly waiting for his escape, but he was run down and brutally slaughtered by his fellow guards before he could be questioned. Chaos erupted. The celebration turned into a scene of panic, and rumors spread like wildfire. Who had orchestrated the plot? Was it the Persian Empire, desperate to stop Philip's impending invasion before it even began? Was it a conspiracy of resentful Macedonian nobles who chafed under Philip's iron rule? Or was it the exiled Queen Olympias, who, from afar, was said to have publicly thanked the gods upon hearing the news of her husband's death? The most chilling whispers, spoken in hushed tones, implicated Alexander himself, the son who had the most to gain and who had been so recently and publicly humiliated. While the court descended into panic and wild speculation, Alexander remained unnervingly cold, focused and decisive. His orders were simple, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Bury my father with all honors, but prepare my horse." He understood with chilling clarity that the throne of Macedon was a vacuum, and if he did not fill it in a single day, he would be the next to fall. At just 20 years old, Alexander was proclaimed king by the army, his legitimacy secured by the cheers of the soldiers he had led and bled with. His first act was not to plan a foreign campaign or to reform a law, but to cauterize the wounds of succession with fire and steel. The throne was surrounded by a constellation of potential rivals, and he moved with terrifying speed to eliminate every single one. First was his cousin Amyntas IV, who possessed a legitimate and perhaps stronger claim to the throne through the direct male line of succession. He was swiftly arrested on charges of conspiracy and executed. Next was Attalus, the powerful general whose drunken insult at the wedding had started the final fatal rift with Philip. Attalus was in Asia Minor, commanding a 10,000-man expeditionary force, a perfect position from which to challenge the new king and champion the cause of Philip's infant son. An envoy from Alexander reached him with a simple, brutal message. Attalus was killed by his own men, who quickly swore fealty to the new decisive king. The most horrific and personal vengeance was reserved for the family that threatened his legitimacy most directly. Philip's young widow, Cleopatra Eurydice, sought sanctuary in a temple, clutching her infant daughter, but there was no mercy. Historical accounts, though disputed, claim that the vengeful Olympias returned from exile and dragged her out. She then allegedly forced the young queen to hang herself, but only after witnessing the murder of her baby, Europa. In a matter of days, the royal family was ruthlessly and systematically purged. The Macedonian nobles, who had been watching cautiously to see which way the wind would blow, were terrified into submission. They swore their absolute and unwavering allegiance. Alexander had not yet fought a single great battle against a foreign enemy, but he had already won the most dangerous war of all, the one for power at home. The price was steep, a throne built upon the blood and bones of his own family. With Macedonia now firmly in his iron grip, the Greek city-states, long resentful of Philip's dominance, saw their chance. In Athens and Thebes, orators and politicians took to the stage, declaring that the strong man was dead, and with him, Macedonian authority over all of Greece. They confidently believed Alexander was just a boy, an unproven youth who could be easily brushed aside. A false rumor of his death during a northern campaign against barbarian tribes was all it took for the proud city of Thebes to openly revolt, expelling the Macedonian garrison. Alexander moved with a speed that defied belief, a lightning strike of military force. He marched his entire army south so quickly that the Thebans refused to believe the reports. They insisted it was a different, lesser Alexander. In a matter of days, he was at the gates of Thebes. He offered terms, demanding only the surrender of the revolt's ringleaders. But the city, defiant and proud, repelled his envoys. The assault was swift and brutal. When Alexander noticed a side gate left momentarily unguarded, he ordered his commander Perdiccas to storm it. The Macedonian garrison, which had been trapped in the city's citadel, the Cadmea, broke out to join the fight from within. The city was surrounded and conquered in hours. Alexander's retribution was designed to be a terrifying message to all of Greece. 6,000 Thebans were slaughtered in the streets, and 30,000 more, the entire surviving population, were rounded up and sold into slavery. Then, he gave the order for the city to be razed to the ground. Every building, every home, every wall was systematically demolished. The only exceptions were the temples of the gods and the house of the poet Pindar, whose ancestor had once written verses praising an ancestor of Alexander's own. The shockwave of Thebes' utter destruction reverberated across Greece. Athens, which had been cheering on the rebellion from afar, was now paralyzed with terror. They immediately sent envoys to beg for mercy, which Alexander, having made his point, granted. At 20.5 years old, Alexander had not only restored his father's empire, but had forged a new and terrifying reputation, he who utterly destroys that which disobeys him. Now, and only now, with Greece silenced by fear, could he finally look east. The Persian Empire awaited. If you're enjoying this journey into the brutal realities of blood and glory, leave a like. It truly helps the video find those who love history, not just the sanitized textbook version of battles. And if you want the next episode on the Asian campaigns, the invasion of the Persian Empire, subscribe and hit that notification bell. No algorithm will keep us from crossing the Hellespont. Before setting out to conquer Asia in the spring of 334 BC, Alexander made one final deeply symbolic pilgrimage. He sailed to the shores of Troy, the hallowed, windswept ground of the heroes from his childhood. This was the landscape of the Iliad, the place where his supposed ancestor Achilles had fought and died. There he laid a wreath on Achilles' tomb. In a deeply personal, ritualistic act, he and his closest companion, Hephaestion, ran a naked race around the tomb to honor the fallen hero. He then entered the temple of Athena and made a fateful exchange. He dedicated his own armor to the goddess and took in its place a sacrificial axe and a sacred shield, said to have been preserved from the Trojan War itself. These were the weapons he would carry into his first battle in Asia, cloaking himself in the mythic legacy of the past. By his side throughout this pilgrimage stood Bucephalus, his silent, powerful companion, a living symbol of his own destiny. At that moment, no one could have known the incredible, world-altering journey that lay ahead. No one knew that the horse would one day die of old age and battle wounds in the far-off land of India, and that Alexander, in his profound grief, would found the city of Alexandria Bucephalus in his honor, and weep for his horse as he had never wept for any human being. But on that day, standing on the shores of Troy, the boy and the horse were a single spear, aimed at the vast, seemingly infinite horizon of the Persian Empire. Behind him, he left a silent court, a bloodthirsty and triumphant mother, a murdered father whose ambitions he had inherited, and an empire he had built upon the bones of his own family. From the venomous courts of Pella to the dusty plains of India, the myth of Alexander the Great truly begins here, not with a glorious battle against a foreign king, but with a cold and ruthless choice made in the chaotic aftermath of his father's murder, the throne or the family. He knew with absolute certainty that he could not have both. So when we speak of the great conqueror, the military genius who redrew the map of the known world, let us first remember the boy who silenced his own conscience with the thundering, world-shaking steps of Bucephalus. The blood of his relatives did not stain him or hold him back. It was the fire that tempered him, forging him like a sword in a furnace of betrayal and ambition. From that hardened, unbreakable metal, the conqueror who would change geography, culture, and the very course of history was born. If you want to continue following his trail of conquest, leave a comment. What would you have done at 20 years old, faced with the choice of losing a kingdom or sacrificing your own kin? In the next episode, we will cross the Hellespont with 35,000 soldiers and witness how a boy from the mountains of Macedonia faced the colossal shadow of the greatest empire on earth. But always remember, before he could become a god in the eyes of men, he first had to become a king. And before he could become a king, he first had to become a survivor. If you liked this video, share it with a friend who loves stories of power, ambition, and their inevitable, often bloody consequences. Subscribing, liking, commenting, every action is a small army that helps our channel grow. We'll see you soon on the banks of the Granicus River.